Fantastic, thank you for having me. So today I'm presenting the Springvale Community Hub, which really should be called the Springvale Library and Community Hub, which is a fascinating project for us anyway so far. So it's located in Springvale. Springvale, if you don't know, is in the southeast of Melbourne. It's on the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation's land. It's quite a large site. It's about the size of the MCG, the actual site, but the building is about just under 4,000 square metres in the middle of that. Springvale, if you don't know, is made up of a very, very rich history of migrants that come into the area. I think Melbourne's become much more multicultural right across the spectrum, but Springvale, its DNA is a migrant community, even though that spreads lots of parts of Melbourne. And this really comes from the history of the Enterprise Hostel. So if you don't know, a lot of migrants who came to Melbourne came straight to this hostel in Springvale and therefore settled in the surrounding area. So the history of the Enterprise Hostel is very integrated into people's memories of Springvale and how they grew up in the area. And that includes our client, the council. The council, a lot of them are first generation migrant leaders that came from Cambodia and Vietnam and Greece and lots of places and settled in Springvale and brought their families up here. So it was very part of our brief to respond to this. But interestingly enough, there's local heroes who are more white, I guess, migrants back in the 50s who were part of the welcoming committee. So there's a really rich history of welcoming and integration into the community from people who have been there a bit longer than others. So the history of this project is that two councils amalgamated quite a bit of time ago into Greater Dandenong Council. The site right here used to be Springvale Council's hub. So effectively when that was taken away, the site was a bit of a hole in the heart of Springvale. And so the brief when we came to it, and it came through a national design competition, I should say, was one of civic generosity. They wanted to give something back to Springvale, to give them back their heart. And so it was an idea of a library, community hub, and a large urban space that people could use in lots of different ways. We were really enamoured with this idea of flags as identity. Flags can be painful for some people coming from certain countries. They can be really joyful for others. This includes obviously the original Indigenous history of the site. And so we're sort of enamoured with this idea about colourful identity as one that would be one of cultural pride, if you like, and one that actually made a civic frontage, just the facade facing on the Springvale Road. It's actually set back quite a way because the original library was on Springvale Road, so we had to build it back in order to demolish the library. So we wanted something that really created a bit of a joyful presence on the street. And one, a bit like a flag, was actually a fluttering presence, so it's actually bricks in a fluttering facade. And this creates sort of a new promenade along the front edge with some active courts I'll show you in a second, and a really sort of joyful entry into the library. Springvale Road on the left, the site's made up of lots of sort of historical titles. So just flip forward one. The main one being this civic sort of restoration that goes through to an existing town hall, which is here. And so when we looked at the site, we actually really were enamoured with the idea of all of these trees around the site, fantastic trees that we wanted to keep. Some of them native, but a lot of them migrant trees. And we sort of had this idea that we might link these migrant trees on the site. The building zone was set by a master plan, set back because the existing library was on the street, but also it was right on top of what were these fantastic river red gums right in the centre of the site, these ones here. So we proposed to create a community green, integrated these river red gums into the site, and also integrated these idea of the migrant path, which integrated all these migrant trees and new possibilities into a sort of circular motion around the park, around a central green. So the site setup looks a bit like this now. The centre of the site, with Rushright Architects, with landscape architects, we made into an Australian garden, something with the idea of the spring from Springvale, picnic forests, the river red gums, and a central green. But around the outside, there's a whole diversity of uses to really cater for all ages of Springvale and lots of different cultural needs, from quiet reading spaces to smoke ceremony places to kids' playgrounds, picnic places, and so forth. And this is all set up by the central lawn. Central lawn can be floodlit at night, can be turned off, and they can show movies through this big rotating AV screen on the facade, and it becomes a big communal space next to the river red gums. But around it are other fantastic spaces. The youth are right into the active arena. This is right on Springvale Road. It's a new urban court next to this sort of colourful facade. The idea of a new gateway, this links the Springvale bus stop into one of the entries into the library with lots of little game plays around here as well. And then the idea of being playful and whimsical, so places where kids can come, they can get a bit wet and play in the civic grounds. Connecting with the Enterprise story was really important, so the idea of a rose garden was really part of the community's identity with the Enterprise. And we also got material thinking, Paul Carter, to get some artistic integration, one of them being the migrant stories of coastlines going through and slicing through the park and telling stories of migrants. We want to, sort of again lift up the pride of Springvale, so the idea of having a bit of a Hollywood moment on Springvale Road. And part of our commission was actually a part of a few outbuildings as well. So one was a public amenity building, was a communal wash area. It's designed a bit like a grotto with, vines and things that will grow into it in the future, with a bit of an idea about sacred spaces inside. The bandstand again was another pivotal moment as you sort of circulate around this migrant path for again activities to happen. And then this undulating playscape, so bringing back the idea of Springvale not as a flat landscape, but one that was actually undulating and playful. And then lastly, the idea that the building itself might become a performing stage out into the central green in the future. And so we'll talk about the building now in itself and how we set up and how we thought about that. Firstly, it was a simple box to start with. It was shaped by the environment, so we wanted these big south clerestory lights to run through to get great natural light into the building. And then we wanted to raise the civic side and lower the suburban side to get this presence on Springvale Road and lower the profile towards much more of the suburban edge on the eastern side. And then, as you've seen before, we really want to keep the river red gums and get this into a communal green. And so the red gums really set the scene for the library. It's where you enter, you float around. The facade itself is made up of 450 by 900 fritted glass panels as a bit of a shading screen on timber struts. And what it creates is this beautiful sort of dappled light that protects the northern edge of the building. It's a 6-star rated building, it's carbon neutral. This facade has a lot to do with that in terms of protecting the northern edge, but it creates breathing spaces and spaces where you enter and come out of the building in a really calm and reflective way. And again at night this sort of facade glows with the interior aspects and creates a very safe wayfinding for people around the site. The solar profile we talked about, so the south clerestory lights run right throughout the building, so on the interior you always get these fantastic clerestory lights that are actually acting as natural ventilation from the underfloor system into the skylights as well. The exterior, we've sort of talked through too. We really want to make an idea of 4 different exteriors. It's a place of many characters. So the other 2 facades, one was about the suburban picturesque for us, so the idea of sort of riffing off a bit of Arkley and making it amped up in terms of the terracotta and brick facade out through the car park onto the suburban side, the eastern side. And then the idea of using some of these 70s sort of artistic integration of the car park in the building from site office into the narrative of the car park going up on the southern side, this idea of sort of larger moments coming up the facade for community use. The interior was again an interior of many characters. And again, there's lots of calm moments around. We're going to show you a lot of sort of joyful moments in between, but a lot of the moments in between are very monotone grey spaces interstilled with these spaces between. And again, this is ripping off Springvale. It's a very vibrant community. You walk through Springvale Mall and it's a collision of cultures and colour. The setup of the building is there's 4 different entries into it. This is people come from lots of different ways into the building. You can sort of go along the protected north and southern edges into it as well. Is that 6, right?
That's 8.
Oh, that's 8. Sorry, I missed 2 numbers.
Yeah, okay, we'll just go for another 37.
Okay, no worries. It splits the library and community rooms. There's 3 great halls in here, the Technology Community and Exhibition Hall. And again, they're extending the voids upstairs, surrounded by lots of community rooms. I'll just take you through what they are. So there's a technology hall around the library, around teaching people, learning spaces, reading balconies overlooking this, quiet study nooks on the outside. The central one is a service hall for the community to get help from the council. And again, the third one is an exhibition hall. And this has integrated art by Paul Carter again, a rose which is above you, and this idea of this integrated welcome signage along the side. The last 3 spaces, there's a maker space, a youth lounge, which is like the attic lounge overlooking the park on the top, and a reading terrace as well off the library. It's really